So this is the Viwoods AiPaper, an e-ink tablet with a focus on note-taking, just like the reMarkable 2, but with, wait for it, AI integration. I know, everything is about AI these days and it can get a bit tiresome. But even besides the AI features, this is actually a surprisingly impressive e-ink tablet. But before we dive in, let's quickly address the elephant in the room, since there has been a bit of controversy surrounding this tablet. This review sample was provided by the company behind the Viwoods AiPaper Kickstarter campaign, with no strings attached. The company had no input on the content of this video and didn't see it before release. Alright, let's move on and check out what's in the box. There is a USB-C cable, a sleek, thin fake leather cover, the tablet, and the pen. Opening the cover, which has a sleep function, already reveals one familiar design choice from the reMarkable 2. And I'll come to a few others throughout this video. So the tablet is held magnetically and is placed in that sidebar right here, which is similar to how the reMarkable is held in place. This allows for a better grip because the Viwoods AiPaper bezels on the sides are rather narrow. What's better than with the competition is how the cover folds with no big bend, making it very easy and comfortable to hold. At just 4.5 millimeters thick, the Viwoods AiPaper is an incredibly thin ink tablet, even thinner than the reMarkable 2 and Boox 10.3, but not by much, but still impressive. And despite it being so thin, it packs a 4100 mAh battery, which I'll talk about later. Even though it's a pre-production unit, the build quality is already very nice. The only unusual part are these two small gaps on the front, which I suspect are for manufacturing purposes. They don't hurt usability and also don't take away from the good impressions, but are just worth noting as being slightly unusual. There is a bit of flex when trying to bend it a little, but actually that shouldn't be a problem for this tablet, because it uses an EInk Carta Mobius screen, meaning it's not on a glass back plate, but instead uses plastic as the base. So it's flexible and more robust than regular EInk Carta displays. The flexible screen also results in a lighter device with roughly 365 grams. So it's on the lighter side for a tablet of that size. And the cover, pen and tablet combined are also not that much heavier and only weigh roughly 515 grams, which is around 100 grams lighter than the competition from reMarkable and Boox. But we'll have to see how well the thin cover holds up over time. The tablet's frame is metal, while the front and back have this plastic layer. The display surface has a paper-like texture, but it's not as rough as on the Kindle Scribe or reMarkable 2. But the pen also plays a role here, because using a different Wacom stylus than the one that comes in the box with other nibs actually makes this feel more paper-like. The power button that doubles as a fingerprint reader is on top, and the USB-C port and microphone are on the bottom. There's no built-in speaker, which seems to be a bit of a wasted opportunity in a tablet running Android 13 with an octa-core CPU, 4 gigs of RAM and 128 gigs of non-expandable internal storage, of which around 100 gigs are available. So it's pretty well equipped, but is missing on-device audio. You can use Bluetooth for audio output though, but since the user interface isn't set up for audio right now, there are no on-screen controls, so it can be a bit fiddly to get to the full Android settings and change settings from there. Below the screen are 3 barely visible capacitive buttons: Back, Home and AI. The last one is a direct shortcut to the AI features, which give the tablet its name. I found the buttons to be spaced sufficiently to have a good grip while not accidentally pressing them when holding the tablet. But I would have preferred if the AI button was actually mappable and not hard-coded to link to the AI features. Because even though the tablet is focusing on AI features, it's still usable without them, and some people simply might not need those and still want to use that button. The pen attaches magnetically to the side of the device, though I wish it were a bit stronger. Still, it's better than on the Boox 10.3. But there is also a loop on the cover, which is super useful for transporting the tablet in a bag. And if you don't want to use that loop at all, you can just hide it behind the tablet in that shallow cutout right here, after which it's only just barely noticeable and not in the way. I have to say that's a very nice detail. Like the cover, the pen also resembles one of the reMarkable pens a bit, but its slightly lighter weight makes it feel less premium, and it also has a subtle rattle. What's noteworthy here is that the pen doesn't use the typical Wacom nibs, which is not great because those won't be as easy to replace once you used up the 10 nibs that come with the tablet. I measured pen latency with an ultra slow motion shot at around 30 milliseconds, which is fine, but not great, because a few other devices managed to get to the 20 milliseconds mark already. But to be fair, that's a difference that's hard to spot even when having those devices side by side, and I suspect it won't be an issue for most people. But of course, lower would have been better. In terms of the writing feel, the latency is low enough to feel natural and doesn't cause any issues. Responsiveness, on the other hand, was top-notch. I didn't notice any delay or lag when touching the pen down on the screen for the first time. Many other devices struggle with that first stroke, and I didn't notice that issue at all on the Viwoods AiPaper. With this latest software, there's also pressure and tilt sensitivity, which are incredibly well implemented. Using the pencil pen type is especially nice, making the Viwoods AiPaper an incredible tablet for sketching. However, you have to be careful not to scratch the display when holding the stylus at an extreme angle, as happened to me when I tested the function. This is because there is a metal cap where you insert the pen tip, which can come into contact with the display if the pen is held at a sufficiently steep angle. Just to be clear, this is not an issue when writing normally, but it can be when sketching and tilting the pen. What's also not great is that I managed to break the pen nib, I guess by pressing down too hard. So writing with it still works, but now it doesn't feel right, like it's too soft. That hasn't happened with any of the other pen nibs I've used in the past. So while the tablet itself feels great to use all around, the pen definitely has room for improvement in my opinion. The display size is 10.65 inches, so slightly larger than most others in that space, which have 10.2 or 10.3 inches. And it uses EInk Carta 1300 Mobius technology, which, as I mentioned, isn't using a glass back plate. So same as the Supernote A5X, this should be much less susceptible to breaking the screen. I still recommend being careful with it though. There is no front light, so since this is EInk and it only reflects incoming light, that means you only can use it in a room with sufficient ambient light, or outdoors of course. Same as the direct competition from reMarkable, Boox or Supernote. The contrast levels are great and the resolution of 300 ppi delivers crisp results, but there's no anti-aliasing in the note-taking app, so lines can look slightly pixelated. There are 3 different EInk modes available: HD, Fast and Ultra Fast, which are useful for using the browser or certain Android apps. Those modes are necessary because EInk is a slow display technology, and rendering contents quickly reduces the quality. So you can either use the crisp but slow HD mode, or one of the faster but lower quality modes to use fast-paced Android apps. More on that in a second. One thing that could be better though is the ghosting situation. Depending on what you're doing, there can be quite a bit of ghosting on the screen. So if you're not familiar with the term, ghosting refers to parts of the previous page or image that shouldn't be visible anymore, but are still visible slightly because of how the positioning of the EInk particles in the screen work. There is a refresh button in the control center to fully refresh the screen to get rid of ghosting. But it would be better if there was some sort of gesture or the option to remap one of the capacitive buttons to do that quicker. Okay, let's talk about the software, because there is a lot to unpack here. Let's start with the operating system, which is Android 13. So this is one of the very few EInk tablets that run something newer than Android 12, which means this is more future-proof than many other EInk tablets out there right now. But same as most others, it only runs an older Android security patch unfortunately, which hopefully will be updated when the tablet finally launches. The Viwoods AiPaper doesn't have a Google Play Store pre-installed, and also no Google Play services available. So installing Android apps needs to be done via sideloading or an alternative app store. There is one pre-installed on the device, which reminds me a bit of how Boox did it in the past. There's a selection of currently 17 apps to download directly from that store. While that's convenient, I recommend getting these apps directly from the sources nonetheless. With the 3 different ink modes I mentioned before, most apps work fine, but the AiPaper doesn't have a very granular control that Boox or BeakMe offer. So I'd say it's aimed more towards being as easy to use as possible without too many complicated settings. And that's essentially true for the whole user interface. Viwoods managed to create a very clean and well-organized UI that's easy to navigate and is honestly quite a welcome surprise. Surprising because many other players in the e-ink space, even with years of experience and dozens of devices, or even huge companies like Lenovo, didn't manage to create something this clean and polished. So that's quite an accomplishment for a new company, which leads me to believe that the people behind Viwoods certainly have some prior experience with creating e-ink tablets, because I doubt it's possible to create something this refined on the first try. But Viwoods is somewhat tight-lipped about that, and when I asked them, they said they have experience with hardware calibration and as an OEM manufacturer, which definitely makes sense with what I'm seeing here. However, it still calls for a bit of caution, since this is a Kickstarter campaign with essentially no face behind it. But more on that later, so back to topic. Even though the UI is impressively well done, it's not perfect, because right now there are only English and Chinese available as the UI languages, and not every English translation is perfect. And personally, I don't see the need to have 2 different note-taking apps for notes and meetings. There's also the picking section where screenshots and notes from third-party apps are saved, which is actually a very handy feature if you're using the tablet to read internet articles, for example, and want to quickly take a note of something you're reading. With the pen swipe down from the top right corner, that function can be enabled very conveniently. Performance of the tablet and responsiveness of the user interface overall is quite good. However, I managed to create a slowdown in the calendar app by just quickly clicking through the days. And when changing pages too fast, some annotations don't seem to be saved reliably every time and disappear. So that's something that definitely needs to get fixed, because I was able to reproduce that problem in eBooks by turning pages quickly after making a note as well. The Notes app lets you organize notes by folders, by favorites, or with tags. But there are no subfolders available right now, which I think would be handy for even better organization. The note-taking app itself feels pretty familiar, as Viwoods seem to have taken inspiration from the reMarkable UI. So you have different pen types, layers, and templates, all easy to navigate, and everything worked as expected in my tests. Except one thing: the eraser on the back of the pen only deletes lines you touch, but not the full stroke, which can be a bit tedious. Sharing the notes works through the Viwoods web interface by generating a QR code with an automatic upload to the Viwood server, via email, or with Bluetooth. What's missing, however, is a simple local export option to just save the note on the internal storage of the device to get it via USB. You can share either individual pages with the sharing function from within a notebook, or you can also share whole notebooks from the notes overview. You can password protect entire notebooks and also the tablet itself. For that, the fingerprint reader that's integrated in the power button is awesome, and that's something I wished I had on the Supernote Nomad as well when I did my long-term review, because it saves you from entering the passcode every time you want to take a quick note. However, what I don't like is that you need to be logged into the Viwoods account to set up that protection. This is meant as a fail-safe, so people can reset the device via email or phone if they forgot the passcode or can't unlock it with their finger for some reason, which would be fine if that wasn't forced. I'd still rather have the option to enable that passcode without the need to use a Viwoods account. They should just add a disclaimer for that. Okay, let's talk about AI features which are implemented through the OpenAI API, because that's a big selling point here. Just for clarification, an API, or Application Programming Interface, is a set of rules that allows different software applications to communicate and interact with each other. And OpenAI the company behind ChatGPT, is providing an API to give access to their large language models outside of the typical ChatGPT chat window. So back to topic. On the AiPaper, there are different types of predefined functions and prompts depending on the app. In the note-taking app, you can generate an article, analyze content, and do AI-assisted text conversion. Let's start with that, because I think that's actually pretty neat, because it's not just based on the actual letters you wrote, but also takes context into account, which from my quick test, the AI text recognition seems to work better than on many other EInk tablets. It can still convert a word even if it's essentially unreadable because it takes context into account. But it's still not bulletproof and sometimes also makes mistakes, same as other text conversion systems. One thing that's definitely worse in this case, however, is that you can't use the search function for searching your handwritten notes. Because unlike a few competitors, the text conversion on the AiPaper for a full page is a separate cloud function done through an API. So it's not happening on the device. What seems to be happening directly on the device, however, is the conversion when using handwriting for text input. You can switch the keyboard to this handwriting mode and use it to fill input fields. That also works with a text box in a notebook as well. Analyzing content with AI also works well and gives you an analysis and interpretation of what's on the page. And the third feature is something I'm not sure what's the point, to be honest, but it can create articles from what's written on the page. In other apps, you can also use the chat window to have conversations, and I think that would actually be more helpful in the note-taking app as well. Let's say you write something and need additional information on the subject. Instead of using your computer or smartphone, you could just open a prompt and ask a question, ideally with the context of what's on the page you're currently on. Exactly that is possible in the Meetings app. Why this isn't available in the note-taking app? No idea. All in all, I'd say the AI integration can actually be quite handy. It's not exactly something we haven't seen before in other devices, but it's implemented much closer to the surface and more prominently on the AiPaper than on others. Personally, I don't need generative AI on the tablet to write me an article, but AI-powered text conversion for better accuracy and summarizing my notes can be incredibly helpful. What I'd love to see in the future is the option to add my own prompts to the context menus, which could be helpful for more specialized content. However, all of that AI comfort and convenience comes at the price of privacy. Even though Viwoods actually mentions you can delete your chats, and it looks like just the chats, I haven't found a way to access any other requests. You're still sending your notes to the cloud, not just to be stored, but actively analyzed. So you have to ask yourself if you're comfortable with that or not. Personally, I think it's fine for certain types of notes, like from a lecture in class, and I would have loved to have something like this when I was in school. But it could be problematic for other things like journaling or business meetings, which contents are more private or even confidential. So even though the AiPaper uses the OpenAI API for its AI integration, which according to OpenAI means that the data is not used for model training, which is a good thing, we don't know how exactly those API calls are implemented, because it's possible that they are still stored on the Viwood server independently from the actual call to the GPT model. Viwoods told me they use Amazon Web Services with the US as the server location, so that's still something to keep in mind here. I'll update you in the comments if I get more information on that. One of the weak spots of the AiPaper are EPub and PDF handling. You get the most important functions like the ability to change the text styling a bit and zoom in on PDFs, but overall, this is essentially just a rudimentary implementation of what's possible. You can directly annotate on the pages, both in EPub files and PDF files, but with ebooks, you must not change the styling afterwards. But Viwoods implemented something similar to Kobo, where the note in the ebooks gets saved as a screenshot and can be viewed and opened in an overview. When doing so, the text styling is reverted to the state the note was taken in, which works very well, but I wished there was some indicator to let me know there's a note at a certain position even if it's not showing up directly because the stylings were changed. Since there are no special view modes for PDF files, you need to zoom in using the on-screen control or pinch the zoom function with a maximum of a 2x magnification. Then you can move the viewport with 2 fingers, which actually works well, but I'd still rather have more options like the columns mode as the one on the Boox devices. However, there are still some smaller bugs to be sorted out with note-taking in PDFs. Sometimes I can't delete annotations I made, other times the annotations only show up when turning back and forth. PDF files can only be shared via the same options as mentioned earlier and not via USB from within the PDF file. That's also only possible as a PNG file page by page. From within the library, you can export full PDF files, but neither option worked flawlessly with annotations, sometimes not being merged with the PDF and missing from the shared file. So there's definitely more work to be done here to make this usable as a reliable PDF management tool. You can also use the mentioned AI features, which again can be quite handy to get a quick summary of a page or paper you're reading. But same as with the notes, it would be great to have the option to use the chat for follow-up questions. Obviously, ChatGPT isn't a reliable source for information, but for quick and easy questions, especially regarding the contents on hand, I typically find it very useful. Let's quickly talk about battery life. And disclaimer, I've only used the Viwoods AiPaper for a short time, so take this with a grain of salt. But in the last couple of days, the AiPaper had really good battery life. The 4100 mAh battery definitely was a perfect choice for that tablet. Even with heavy use, the battery held up well, and in standby, the tablet only lost about 1% of charge every 5 to 7 hours. The 4 weeks of battery life with 2 weeks of daily use Viwood claims don't seem far-fetched at this point. Okay, so all in all, the AiPaper looks like a really good, maybe even great ink tablet. But there are a few uncertainties that are important to mention here. The first one is regarding the Kickstarter campaign itself. As always with crowdfunding, there's a risk of not getting what you backed, even with guarantees on the campaign page. And although I already have a surprisingly well-functioning prototype here in my hands that seems to be quite advanced in its design and production, it's always wise to only invest what you can afford to lose, because Kickstarter can be unpredictable. And in the past, there were some Kickstarter campaigns with ePaper devices that didn't go so well. Aside from Kickstarter, another uncertainty is the longevity of the AI integration. As I mentioned, to use most of the AI features, the device needs to communicate with the cloud. Viwoods uses ChatGPT, or more accurately, the OpenAI API with GPT 3.5 or GPT-4 for that. These are not incredibly expensive models to run, and even with millions of tokens, it shouldn't be too costly. So I doubt the company will face any financial issues with that anytime soon. And as the company told me, they also expect it to be quite sustainable. However, down the line, let's say in 5 years or so, this could still be a potential issue, without knowing the exact cost and also without knowing if the company is even still operating them. So that's something to keep in mind. I think it would actually be great if we could add our own OpenAI API key to the system to not have to rely on Viwoods to stay in business to use those functions. Okay, so that's it. The Viwoods AiPaper was honestly a huge surprise to me. Hardware and software are so well done, it's hard to believe this is a first-generation tablet from a company that hasn't done this before. Not everything is perfect, and there is room for improvement in some parts like EPub and PDF-Functions and the export features, to name the most obvious ones. But all in all, using the review sample doesn't feel like the prototype it actually is. The thin and lightweight build, the decent battery life, and the sleek and mostly intuitive UI are really well done. And even without the AI features and cloud services, this is a pretty strong offering. So bottom line is, if you're on board with the AI integration, with its privacy implications, and are willing to take the Kickstarter risk, the potential reward is actually pretty impressive. I know I've used that word quite a lot in this review, But it's true, the Viwoods AI paper could be the beginning of something great, and I for one sincerely hope the campaign will be successfully completed as planned, so we see more devices like this in the future. Like and subscribe if you found this video helpful. Thanks for your time watching, and see you in the next one.